Hello class and welcome to week 6 on culture, tools, and visual strategies in learning. Really excited to begin this week's work with you, and I'm going to give you what I think will be a helpful theory and some examples about learning using multimedia objects. This work is really based on the groundbreaking work of Richard Mayer, and I'll provide the citation at the end of the presentation. Let's get started. Here is a paragraph that describes the operation of a standard, typical bicycle pump. If you were to take a moment and read this, you would get an overview of how a pump works. This is an example of learning from text. Now, learning from text is an effective way to learn, but you might be surprised to learn why. Our brain has certain systems that are for visual processing and auditory processing. Of course, it makes sense that when you read text, you're using your visual system to process the written text. But you may be surprised to find out that you also are using your auditory system. This is the sense of that reading to yourself, where you're actually speaking to yourself the words, even when you are reading silently. Therefore, both the visual and the auditory systems are involved in learning from text. However, if you are like most learners, this text will provide only limited support for you to understand the functions of a bicycle pump. In fact, on a test of meaningful deep learning, most students will score only about 25% correct. Now, study this multimedia asset, where the non-italicized text is represented as a graphic with labels and the italicized text is embedded in the graphic. Again, if you're like most learners, you will find this multimedia asset is more supportive of your understanding of a bicycle pump. In fact, on the same test of meaningful learning, students will score an average of 60% correct. Based on this and several similar studies, we know that people learn better from words and pictures than from words alone. But why? When we add images and reduce and reposition the text, as in this example, we actually increase the information processed visually and help connect it to the information processed auditorily. We are actually increasing the amount of information that can come into the visual and auditory system and facilitate its connection. However, if we believe that more is better and we added the whole text and the graphic with narration, then we will likely overload the auditory and visual processes. So even though people do learn better from words and pictures, they must be designed consistent with the affordances of the human processing system. Having supplied you with some of the basic theory behind the ideas, I'm now going to give you 6 straightforward strategies to make use of these theories when you are designing your learning experiences. The first is to avoid eye candy, decorating your objects with photos or pictures. You might think it increases interest, but students find it distracting. The image on the left of the surfer is awesome, but it actually distracts students from processing the information. Students prefer a straightforward multimedia that concisely relate text and graphics as displayed on the right. The second strategy is to drop a hint. Show learners what is important and how concepts are organized. On the left is not preferred because learners have to spend effort to determine what is important and how it all fits together, and little effort on understanding the concepts. On the right is preferred because students can use features like bold text, ellipses, and tabbing to easily see the importance and structure of content and spend more effort on understanding the concepts. The third strategy is to avoid redundancy. Graphics and text should be complementary, not redundant. On the left, you see an image of the water cycle, and in the yellow is a closed captioning of information. The black text below shows the voiceover narration. This is not preferred because reading and listening to the same text at the same time is redundant and overloads the student's auditory processor. It's preferred, as on the right, to simply have the graphic displayed with the voiceover. This makes the narration and graphic complementary and not redundant, using both visual and auditory processors without overloading. The fourth strategy, call it get it together. Graphics and text should be presented in the same space or at the same time. On the left, separating graphics and text makes it harder to understand, while on the right, with an integrated presentation, you're embedding the text with the graphic and use arrows and numbers to make it easier to process. This strategy we call Be Goldilocks. Not too long or short, not too simple or complex, but just right. See, the image on the furthest left is too simple to represent the flow of blood in the heart. The image in the middle, with all of the detailed labeling, is too complex to help teach the flow of blood in the heart. Really, the image on the furthest right is the right level. It's minimally complex to represent the flow of the blood in the heart, and it's preferable. Finally, first things first. Show parts before the whole. In the image on the left, learners begin by seeing the whole structure in motion. What is preferred is the image on the right, where students get pre-training on each part before seeing the whole structure. Here's the reference for the seminar on which this was based, and anything by Richard E. Mayer on the topic of multimedia learning will be well worth your time. I hope you enjoyed this week's lecture for Week 6, Culture, Tools, and Visual Strategies.